Hey everybody, and welcome to Kickstart, a show where we profile startups and the stories behind their founders. Today I'm joined by Jeremy Almond. Hey Jeremy.
Hey Patrick, how you doing, man?
Can you get
Oh, we're gonna do that?
Yeah,
Look at that.
Solidify the start. Jeremy is from PayStand. Would you like to introduce PayStand and what you guys do over there in Scotts Valley?
Yeah, happy to. So PayStand is a B2B payment network. So you can imagine what Venmo does between consumers, making money digital. We do for complicated commercial transactions.
Yeah, nice. Very complicated commercial transactions. Very cool. First question I have for you is, can I write you a check in Bitcoin?
Yeah. You know, most of our customers are CFOs or controllers at big unsexy companies, $100 million manufacturing company, an insurance company. So we're slowly moving them into the digital age. It mind boggles most people who are thinking about digital currency or Venmo world that most transactions in the U.S. still go through paper check.
Yeah.
Paper checks were built in the 1600s is when they sort of took off. So the fact that is still the world we live in. We've got a long way to move people. So our goal is to move them into this digital era. I'd love to see a day when they're moving into some kind of digital currency. At first, I think it would be an awesome success just to move them away from paper checks.
Yeah, of course. I think the only people writing paper checks nowadays are my grandma.
Your grandma and about $1 trillion, no kidding, $1 trillion of other commercial companies in the US.
That's incredible.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. So that's PayStand. I want to learn a little bit about you, Jeremy, and your story. I heard that you have sailed across the world. Is this true? And if it is, I want to know what you learned about yourself in that experience.
Well, let's see. So like many startups, I think my journey sailing across the world was a failure. I didn't actually intend to start sailing across the world. I was actually living in New York. It was about this time of year. It was February. I was winding down a company I was with, did very well, and so I was thinking about what was next. And I was complaining because the snow was really cold. I'm from California originally, and so people were saying, "Stop complaining, just go back to California." And so I thought, well, okay, I'll try to do something interesting. So I originally thought I'd hitchhike or something like that. Yeah. Somebody said, "Well, why don't you sail?" And so I said, "Oh, okay, I've never sailed, but sounds like a good call." Like any startup, you just kind of go, "Well, sounds like a good call, let's do it." And so, I left New York a few months later, got down to the Panama Canal and thought, this is pretty good. Maybe I'll just keep going. And so, we kept going across the Pacific, made it mostly around, so we got to Africa.
Wow.
And I'd been out.
How many days did it take, or months maybe even, did it take to get to Africa?
Year. So I'd been out over a year and a half almost. And, it's funny. So I was in my late 20s at that point. So at some point, you go through this period where after doing a long ride for a tech startup, you go, I need some time off.
Yeah.
And then in about a year, I started going, I'm a pretty type A guy, and I'm pretty young. What the heck am I doing in the middle of freaking nowhere? And so some circumstances happened that said, it's a time to go back, and sailed the boat to Australia, hopped on the next flight, and jumped into the next thing. So,
very cool.
But it was a great ride. It was a great ride.
So for the viewers that are not aware, Scotts Valley, where PayStand is headquartered, is right outside of Santa Cruz, which some would argue is the birthplace of surfing. You are a big surfer?
I am indeed, yeah.
So is Scotts Valley one of the best places to have a headquarter for a business?
It's a pretty magical place. I've been fortunate to do tech in a couple different towns, and look, the Silicon Valley is still the sort of center of everything. It's Rome for the modern world in a lot of ways. But I also think it's really important for us as humans to refresh, rebuild. They think as an executive, it's how much time are you spending thinking not just in the business, but working on the business or about the business. And so, I think for me to be able to live in Santa Cruz, which is, this beautiful place with redwood trees and surf, and just a 30-minute drive from Silicon Valley is very, very amazing. And so about half our staff kind of lives in the valley, half our staff lives on the coast, and so it's absolutely wonderful. I feel very blessed.
Yeah, it's almost like you're in a different world on the other side of Santa Cruz Hills.
Yeah.
Different pace of life.
It is. It's good. But people are still running hard, so there's been some great companies there. Netflix was started there, so there's been some great companies there.
They're in Los Gatos now?
They're in Los Gatos now, and so there's some other great companies. Looker, is doing very well, so there's plenty of great companies on both sides.
Awesome. All right, one more question before we get into your professional career. If you could enact any type of environmental policy to help out the oceans, what would that be?
Well, I think we're doing a lot of the right things right now. It was this garbage island thing was a really surprising
Texas,
thing to
right?
me. Yeah, so when we were sailing, and so we were sailing across the Pacific, and so it was mind blowing to me to think that there was just this zone of trash hanging out. That's somewhere in the Pacific, and it kind of moves around, and it's the size of a state. It's unfortunate, but a lot of the plastic gets in the ocean, and so I think this notion of how do we start using responsibility in terms of what we're buying is important, right? We all should be living in sort of a harmony with the world we live in, right? We can't be just a consumption culture, and so I think some of the work that's being done around plastics, less plastic bags, is actually good for the ocean.
Absolutely, I think we can all agree on that one. That's awesome. So okay, now we'll leave the fun stuff.
You got me on some ocean soapbox.
Yeah, I love to hear that though. Can you tell me about your professional experience, sort of a little bit of run me through your resume and what led up to maybe the aha moment you had where you realized there's an opportunity to create a company called PayStand and how you came to that conclusion? Yeah,
I think anytime you start a company building's hard work, right? And so I think anytime you start a business, you really need to think about where does sort of your professional background and your personal passions intersect, right? And so for me on the professional side, I've spent almost 2 decades now working in unsexy B2B companies. Both I started on the product and engineering side, and then later on the business side. And one of the things I've seen in dozens of companies at this point was, there's this big digital transformation thing that's happening for companies in the enterprise, and what that means is they're moving their core sort of systems into the cloud, right? So they're trying to become digitally native, and so you have their CRM are in the cloud, so Salesforce or other sort of core sales things are now digital. You have their accounting systems and their manufacturing systems, those are in the cloud, so you have NetSuite and Oracle. And it's crazy, but the money side, the part that lubricates the business, right, the oil that runs the business, that's still entirely manual. And so I saw that time and time again, and I thought, that problem needs to be solved. And so I'd say that's one half. You start with a problem, right, and an opportunity, and then the other half is do we think as technologists that we can make impact that pushes society forward in a positive way? And so for me, 10 years ago, there was this financial crisis that happened. And so my family, like many millions of families in America, were deeply affected by this sort of financial meltdown. And one of the things that I think about, right, is the banking system in general is so critical to our economy. And we're now 10 years into a bull cycle, and so we almost forget how meaningful it was that when they let us down, when they fall a little bit short, it has serious societal impact, right? And so what I think about is, the digital era, this democratized internet era, really hasn't hit banking yet. And it's starting to at a little level at the consumer side. And so we're spending more and more of our time using Apple Pay or these various things where technology is finally coming in. But on the commercial side, very little has changed. We're still using technology that was pre-internet. We're still using business models that were pre-internet. And so how can we think about a better banking system and financial system that actually improves the economy in a lot of ways and opens up, I think, more opportunity? And so for us, the idea of bringing digital first philosophy to the internet into banking is a big deal, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. So was there a moment where you said, "I'm going to do it"? I have this crazy idea. It's called PayStand. I'm going to leave maybe the comforts of my job, my employment, and maybe you were at sea and but was there a moment where you're like, I'm going to go do this? And what was that feeling like? And how did you listen to your instincts? Because I think it's a lot of things that future entrepreneurs out there might be struggling with, right? Like, how do you trust your instincts and go for it?
Yeah, I think, I've done startups for a while now, both on the operating side and even on the investing side now. And one of the things I would say is, do your research and do your time. I mean, in a lot of ways, PayStand's a company that for over a decade, I had to really think about the thesis. And I think in some ways, there's a good thing that happened in the Valley, this notion of like, sort of lean startups, build something small. But one of the downsides to that is I actually think that there's a problem with the fail fast mentality. Company building is really, really hard work. If you're going to build a great company, it's going to take a decade plus to even get to, inning 2 or inning 3. And so you do need to count your costs. And so I think for me with this company, it was, did I believe that there was something that we could both meaningfully build a big business, meaningfully help CFOs and controllers in large organizations, and also sort of move society forward in an interesting way. And so, I think that's something I really believe that I want to spend the next decade of my career doing.
Awesome.
And so I think that's important to count that cost before you jump into startups. It's more than just some mythology of five people in a basement, right?
Yeah.
You need to sort of think about what
it could be a garage.
Yeah,
it could be a garage.
Garage, or basement. Yeah, it's true.
Awesome. So PayStand is it's 2019. Everything is as a service, right?
Yeah, everything's as a service.
PayStand is payment as a service. Can you describe to the viewers exactly what that is and what that means to your customers?
Yeah. So I think so how does this ethos, right, of changing financial services, how does that actually play out, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I think the banks have fallen short with is this notion, right, that they optimized for margin, sometimes at the cost of their customers. And so in the financial crisis, what that meant was they optimized for sort of taking on too much risk, right? And we had all these things. At the payment level, what it means is the business model it's really not built for today's day and age. So the way payments, the business model works is everyone pays, if you're going to use some kind of payment network, around 3%. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you swipe your credit card or use your Apple Pay at Starbucks, they're paying 3%. Now, 3% on a $5 cup of coffee is, it's not a lot, right? It's a few cents. On the other hand, for customers like ours on the B2B side, these are $1,000, $100,000 invoices with companies that they've worked with for a decade, right? They have contracts and sales have negotiated. How would you possibly pay 3% on a $100,000 invoice?
Yeah, like, it's significant.
Why would you $3,000 to send ones and zeros between companies that have worked with each other makes 0 sense.
Yeah.
And so what we've done is said, look, that business model makes no sense for the digital era. And so we've pioneered this notion that there should be a fixed cost instead. And so we have a cloud network. And it's a little bit like Netflix, right? You're moving from a transactional model to a SaaS-based model. And so we're driving down the cost of payments. And that allows customers of ours that didn't move into the digital era to finally move into the digital era. So
that's awesome. So we kind of talked about earlier, you're dealing with old school, maybe traditionalist type companies that are maybe not as technologically forward, haven't adopted digital transformation as much as others.
Yeah.
How did those conversations go when you were trying to pitch PayStand payment as a service and what the benefits it can bring to these companies?
Yeah, so one of the things that's happened a little bit is this bifurcation, right? So the Silicon Valley companies, in a lot of ways, they're digitally native in everything they do. So take Uber, for example, right? The Uber magic moment that we used when we first used Uber, we forget about. But when you walked out of Uber for that first time, it was actually a bizarre consumer experience because you were used to paying somebody, and then you left, and you didn't pay them, right?
Yeah.
It just sort of magically happened, right? So it was actually a money or payment experience was the magic Uber moment.
Yeah.
So here's a Silicon Valley company that's now, sort of gone on infamously. And so what happened behind the scenes? Well, Uber had to sort of validate that you got to the place you were supposed to get to. Uber had to validate like who was the driver. They had to split the money in the right way, send you the receipts, give the driver a cut, take it out of your account, give the them a cut, and all this sort of stuff, right? So how does a supply chain company or a logistics company or a distribution company or manufacturing company have that same kind of magic moment experience, right? That isn't digitally native? And so our point of view is we need to come and bring them sort of digital payments as service type technology where they can have these Uber type magic moments where their business can be forward to the customer, have a better customer experience, actually be operationally more efficient by driving automation through that process where, before you were handing taxi drivers some money and then they were going and doing these various things, right? And then ultimately drive costs down because what was manual process or you're paying money to a card can run over our network now. And so that approach can radically transform how a business can compete in the digital era. And so we see some of the most innovative companies that have been around for decades, even 100 years, some of our customers, and they're entering this era and they're being very forward thinking about what technology and services can they use to transform their business, right?
Yeah. So let's say that you have successfully locked in a contract with a company to use PayStand. What is that customer journey like for them? What's the onboarding process? How do you kind of maintain that relationship, troubleshoot with them, integrate it into their systems? How's that whole thing work?
Yeah, so the commercial, as I said, it's much more complicated, right? Than just beaming your friend some money after drinks, right? And so one of the approaches we've taken is this notion that we have to meet the customer where they're at, right? When you talk about the journey. And so what we do is we say, look, we will take on all of your payment process. So that could be, paper checks and ACH and wire and cards. We'll do all of it. And over time, we're going to help you migrate all of that to digital. Because over time, what's going to happen is your customers are going to have a better experience, and you are going to save more money. You're going to drive more automation up, right? It's going to be better. There's going to be more and more ROI. And the analogy I like to use here is, Netflix, we on Saturday now, we binge watch, Stranger Things all day long, right? And we take it for granted that for $10 or $15 a month, whatever it is now, you get this unlimited library for one monthly cost, right? And it's all delivered in high def to your home. The reality was when they started that business, the internet wasn't there. Broadband was not going directly to your living room with a TV that was internet enabled, right? And not every sort of media company had put it all up on the cloud. And so what did they do? Well, they shipped a lot of DVDs in this red envelope thing, and they said, hey, start this process. And it's going to kind of be like digital in the sense that you don't have to go into Blockbuster anymore. You don't have to pay late fees anymore, right? It's going to be unlimited as fast as the mail will move it. And then we're going to show you this digital thing that we're going to move to, this promised land. And over time, you're going to stop caring about those red DVDs in the mailbox, and you're going to only just turn on Stranger Things on Saturday. And so it took a journey, right? And so we do that with our customers too. We say, look, what's your equivalent of DVD today? And then how do we move you into sort of this amazing broadband unlimited HD world, right? So
there's always a Netflix binging analogy in business.
Yeah, no, I mean, who doesn't want to talk about binge watching, right?
Yeah. So what are some of the biggest pain points, or maybe like the most common pain points that you guys encounter?
So I think at the day-to-day level, right? Like the CFO is thinking about this strategic narrative about digitally bringing the business in. But really, for us, the AR clerks, the controllers, they're every day just trying to chase down money, right? So the business, right? It's so critical to get your revenue. And you have somebody who's trying to call up their customers with an awkward conversation going, hey, where is that payment? I send you the invoice. It's a very bizarre thing because we negotiate things like net 30, which means I'm going to deliver a service and then in 30 days I'm going to pay you. But then what ends up happening is, a bunch of time you have somebody in the finance department who's still trying to track it down in some way, right? Which means they're spending a lot of time instead of helping the business move faster, helping the business grow more, they're sort of slowed down, right, by this process that shouldn't be. And so for us to be able to come in and say, look, we can automate that whole process, right? We can automate the whole process so your customer has an amazing experience, money magically moves into your account, and then your financial systems, whether it's NetSuite or other sort of main systems, are automatically updated, and you can go back to the business of thinking strategically about your business as opposed to trying to run down and collect money all day.
And that's probably what any CFO's hoping for, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing, right? How do they grow faster? How do they improve their bottom line is much better than, how do they go and try to track money down.
And those are some of the ways that you're speeding up the time to cash for these businesses?
Yeah, so we generally do three main things, right? We'll speed up their time to cash. We'll automate the process, so we automate all the reconciliation, how it goes back into their ERP systems, and then we'll lower their overall cost to collect their revenue, right? Which can be very meaningful for the business.
Yeah. What are some goals for 2019 for you and for the company?
Yeah, I think right now we're at a fun stage, right? So we've raised venture capital from a number of great investors in the Valley here, folks who've funded PayPal, folks who funded Coupa, which is a great enterprise financial service company, Cabbage, great lending company, and so for us it's just growing more, helping deliver to our customers. I think we tripled last year. I think we'll probably triple again this year, and so that. As a business and sort of in leadership, that just means hiring the right people, serving the customer well, and so there's a lot of work to do when you're running at that kind of rate. So,
of course. So my last question, I saved my favorite question till the end.
Here it comes.
And of course, this channel is intended to help entrepreneurs follow their dreams. If you could give an entrepreneur any single piece of advice in the context of sailing in the open sea, what would that be?
Okay, interesting. So we had this event happen. Plenty of events happen when you're sailing out in the middle of nowhere, on a small boat. And so at one point, we had like these GPS on our phone or whatever, and then like a GPS navigation. So it tells you, when you're crossing from one island to another for weeks out at sea, where to go, right? Well, we were in the middle of a storm, and basically in the middle of the storm, lightning hit the boat, and fortunately the boat was mostly okay, but it basically zapped out all the electronics in the boat.
That had to be so loud.
It was the storm itself was fairly intense, right? And so I was in this awkward scenario where I took this captain's license test like on a lark, but I didn't really pay that much attention. I think I studied like the night before or whatever, and so there was this section on how to navigate without GPS by the stars and whatever, and by like a sextant, and I didn't remember any of it at all. And so I'm trying to think geez, what do we do? We were like a long way. We were a couple weeks out to the next island, and if we missed the island, we were going to be like, I don't know, to Antarctica or something, right? And so it would have been pretty bad. And so I was just kind of processing through, what do I need to do? And what I realized was there were really two things that mattered. The first thing was, are we pointed in the right long-term direction, right? Like, are we just directionally headed towards the island chain we needed to go to, right? I think it was the French Marquesas at the time. So were we pointed in the right way at a weekly level, right? And then at the day-to-day level, was I doing the micro turns I needed to make sure we were staying on course, right? And everything else you can worry about, but you can't really control, right? And so, what does that mean for startups, right? I think a lot of people think about the strategy of what's 2 years out. I think a lot more about two things. Are we pointed in the right long-term vision? Are we building the right company missionally? Are we going in a direction that can help transform society, help our customers? Are we going in the right long-term direction? And then two, are we making the day-to-day micro adjustments to make sure we're headed in that direction? And everything else, at some level, you got to be zen about.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love it. That was a good answer. I was wondering where you.
I had no idea. So
awesome.
Gotcha.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, man.
Viewers as well. Thanks for joining us. And you want to go to Pleasure Point, catch some waves?
We can get some waves, man. Board meeting.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys.